Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the two animation methods, straight ahead and pose to pose. We're going to describe what they are, when it is best to use each, and look at some shot examples. So let's get straight into it, starting with pose to pose animation. When doing pose to pose animation, you first map out the main keys of the entire action. It's all about figuring out the poses and the timing of the action without worrying about any details yet. You often skip a bunch of frames to fill in later when the overall motion is done and working well. This is the method we used for most of our animations so far. In the bouncing ball exercise, we first determined the top position of the ball, then moved to the bottom position and the squash. Then we mapped out our stretch poses. In the ball bounce across the screen, we figured out the overall left to right motion of the ball from start to finish. Then we mapped out the individual bounces and so on. And in the robot walk cycle, we didn't worry about anything but the main four poses to sell the motion first. This method is preferred in most cases because it gives you full control over your work. You know pretty quickly where your animation is heading, and you can make corrections very early on and very easily, because everything is laid out for you. It's kind of like writing an outline for your book first and then going in and filling out each chapter afterwards. This makes your work easier to tackle because you know how the book is going to end and what you need to do to get there, instead of typing blindly and hoping it takes you somewhere interesting. Now moving on to straight ahead. Straight ahead animation is pretty much the opposite. It requires you to go almost frame by frame and sculpt the poses as you go. This makes it really hard to figure out the timing of your animation because you don't really know how many frames you need until you get to the end. It's also hard to do any eases correctly because you don't know how far apart individual drawings or frames should be from each other. This method is used in stop motion animation, which is why it's such an impressive type of art. In 3D, you generally want to avoid it for any main action that your character is performing. Straight ahead is great when you have a specific parameter to follow. Let's look at this very impressive animation of Elsa from Frozen 2. Most likely the artist first animated the horse jumping around, since that's the main action that everything is dependent on. That part was probably done using the pose to pose method. For Elsa, however, they probably relied heavily on straight ahead animation because anything she does is very much affected by the motion of the horse. So we're assuming they animated the horse in pose to pose and then animated Elsa straight ahead to react to the horse's animation. A much simpler example is our spinning ball with tail. We don't know how the tail is going to act until we know what the ball is doing. And we kind of had to go in order from pose 1 to pose 2 to pose 3 on the timeline, scrubbing back and forth to feel the action. It would be very hard to skip ahead and predict what the tail would look like many frames later. This is generally true for any non-rigid attached objects, like hair, scarves, or anything else that's dependent on the primary object driving its motion. Of course, you can encounter cases when you need to use both methods. When doing our bowling ball rolling off of a shelf, we mostly utilize the pose to pose method. But there was this tricky section where we had to figure out how exactly the ball rolls off as it reaches the corner of the shelf. We needed just the right amount of roll to make sure that the ball doesn't intersect with the shelf's edge. I would say that part was more of a straight ahead approach, after which we moved on to doing pose to pose again. I would also say that most of the time, pose to pose animation is associated with animating in stepped mode, which is the constant interpolation we used in the walk cycle video. That's where your pose is held until another pose is reached. That being said, it doesn't always have to be so. It depends on the artist's preference and the needs of the specific shot. We haven't done too much stepped animation yet, but we will be doing more and more as we progress through the course and tackle more complex shots. When it comes to straight ahead animation, it is almost always done in spline, which is the Bezier or sometimes linear interpolation, because you want to see the motion right away as it's happening. So that's it for this video. Now you should know the difference between the two styles or methods and when you might want to use each. I hope this helps you, but don't worry, we will be guiding you through the lessons, so you'll always be able to tell what method we're applying and when. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.